If you've been listening to the Eat More Carbs podcast, you know that Reilly and I are both in our running era. To make sure that we're properly fueled for training, we're using both carbohydrates and 2 2 is an all-natural pre-workout designed to enhance athletic performance through the benefits of New Zealand blackcurrant berries. Studies have shown these berries to increase vasodilation and prime the body to kickstart muscle recovery. These antioxidant-rich berries have a sweet and tangy flavor and will level up your performance and recovery. Use code Reilly for 20% off 20 packs and multi-serve packs online at 2before.com. This is the Eat More Carbs podcast. Hello and welcome to the Eat More Carbs podcast. My name is Jenna Fisher and I'm here with my co-host Reilly Beatty. Today I'm going to get Reilly's reaction as a sports dietitian to some of the Olympians fueling plans that we've been seeing through the Olympic trials.
I am so excited about today's episode. Before we jump into today's super fun episode, this is just a quick reminder that if you are not sick of Jenna and myself and you want to spend more time with us, you can apply to work with us on an individualized and one-on-one basis through the link below.
Before we get into some of your reactions to this fueling, what's your high and low?
So starting off with my high for this week, usually start off with a low, but I'm going to mix it up a little bit. So there's this new term that I stumbled upon on TikTok. And this might show you what side of TikTok I'm on, but we're all familiar with the term YOLO.
Mm-hmm.
But have you heard of phobia?
No.
F-O-B-I. And I think I resonate with it, but it is the fear of being invited.
Wait.
And my introverted self might love this.
Okay, can you use it in a sentence?
I think it's when you're afraid to go to the grocery store because like you're going to see somebody that you know and they're going to invite you to something, or like, you know, Sally from the block is going to invite you to her book club that you don't want to be necessarily a part of, but maybe like you want to be a part of. So you're like just confused on like, do you want social interaction or are you actually like scared of being invited to a social event?
Okay. I think I have this because my thing is, and I've said this for such a long time, actually, I can't take full credit for it. It was somebody that I knew from high school. It was a dear friend of mine. He used to say he didn't want to go. He just wanted to be invited. He's like, I know I don't want to be there, but I just want to be invited. I want to know that somebody wanted me to be a part of it, but I didn't actually want to go to the event. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, kind of. It's just kind of like, you're like, I want to go, but then if I'm invited, like, do I have to say yes? Do I have to say no? Like, I'm conflicted.
Okay, yeah. This does resonate with our introverted selves.
Yeah, like my extroverted, introverted self. It's like when my introvert hates when my extroverted part of myself, like, commits to an activity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I could see that.
You know, we love our friends and our family, but I just thought that was kind of like a funny term that's going around right now.
I like it.
So my low is I need somebody to help me out. I need somebody's advice because the amount of outfits that I go through in a day is unrealistic. Between feeding Charlie, where I'm completely covered in oatmeal, and then going outside for a walk and working out and also pumping, I feel like I'm going through 5 outfits a day, and it's not acceptable.
So we need like someone in fashion to help us.
Yes, I need something where like maybe I can sweat in a little bit and then I can come inside and I can still work, because what's happening is I go out in the pea soup weather and I sweat for my like morning walk, and then I want to work out later in the afternoon, and then now I've worn 3 outfits minimum.
Mm-hmm. And you guys have that with the humidity where you can't get away with coming back inside and staying in the same clothes. Like you're going to have to change because you're just like disgusting after you go outside for 5 seconds in the humidity.
Especially like a wet sports bra. Like that's not happening.
No. Mm-mm. Okay. Well, if anybody has tips or suggestions for Reilly's outfit changes, please let us know. Leave them below or DM us on Instagram.
But don't ask me to come go shopping with you because I'm scared of being invited to that activity. What about you? What's your high and your low?
My high is that this past weekend, my husband planned one of the like most thoughtful date nights ever. He listens to this podcast, so I just want to say thanks to him again because it was really, really sweet. He took me to this new restaurant, like new to us, not, you know, new. And it was really good. We had a great time there. And then we did like a painting class together. And he's not very artistic and neither am I, but we had so fun doing something that was like not in the normal realm of like, let's go work out together. Let's go watch a baseball game, like something like that, like something very outside of like our comfort zone, I guess you could say. And we had such a good time.
What did you paint? I have to know.
It was like a desert skyline. So I'll send you a picture. It's like one of those classes where they lead you through how you're going to paint it. So everybody's looks a little bit different, but at the end of the day, everybody's painting looks the same. I'll send you a picture of both of ours and you can guess who did which one because we've been kind of playing that game with everybody.
That's so Arizona coded that you painted a desert.
Yeah, right?
Oh, that's so fun though.
Yeah, we had a good time. My low this week is a little bit unusual because it actually isn't something that's actually happened. It's something that I just keep thinking is going to happen. And that's because a whole bunch of people have recently been sending me this video of a girl who lives in Arizona and she finds like a snake skin on the top shelf of her kitchen. And because of that, I just have created in my mind this scenario where I'm going to walk into a room, or when I'm cleaning or using the restroom or something like that, I'm going to find a snake in the most unwanted place ever. Because of that video, I am now so concerned I'm going to find a snake in my house. So I guess that's just what happens when you live in Arizona. But I want to get into your reactions from the Olympic trials athletes' fueling plans. I'm so excited to talk to you about this. I love the Olympics. We love the Olympics. We're watching the trials right now. We're getting really excited for Paris in August. The first one we're going to start with is starting out strong with track and field. Everyone's favorite seems to be right now is Sha'Carri Richardson. So
Oh,
I want
I
to talk
love her.
about same. Watching her is just entertaining, I think, and I'm rooting for her all the way. She said that when it comes to her snacking, she likes dried fruit, specifically dried mangoes, and then sometimes she'll pair that with some peanuts and almonds. She likes to keep it very straightforward when it comes to her snacking. As a Olympian, that's her snacking. What do you think of that?
So first off, disclaimer with all of this, everybody has, very individualized fueling plans. But when we generally look at her snacking and her choices, as a sports dietitian, I actually love these options. I've worked with so many athletes that love dried fruit, especially like a dried mango around activity, around practice, around workouts. And it's also something that's really easy to transport. When we look at, the performance plates, we look at color, carbs, and protein, and color can be really hard to travel with and also find, especially in a place like Paris, going over there, going to Europe. A lot of the athletes that are coming from the States sometimes struggle with getting fresh produce, but being accustomed to having dried fruit like this dried mango is something that you can easily pack, and she can easily bring that with her. Same thing with the almonds and the nuts. We love, with a snack, we love carbs and protein or fat combined, and that's what she has in her snack. So yay.
When it comes to her meals, you just mentioned performance plates, but she likes to include what she calls nutrient dense foods. And to her, that means focusing on things like lean proteins, vegetables, and whole grains. Of course, we don't know her specific needs, but overall, to me, that sounds like a very balanced performance plate with protein, color, and carbohydrates there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, we're huge fans over here too. I love that she incorporated whole grains, because I don't think when you and I were growing up, and we were playing and we were competing, people were outwardly and positively talking about things like whole grains and certain carbohydrates like that. So to see somebody on the biggest stage sharing that, I think that's really powerful, and that's great.
We're going to move on to the fastest man alive, Usain Bolt. Now, there was a big rumor, and he kind of confirmed it, that when he won his 100 meter and 200 meter runs in Beijing, that he ate chicken nuggets for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
I was actually just talking to a client who's a college athlete before this podcast about how the chicken nugget game in, the States and therefore the world also has really stepped up. It's not just dino nuggets anymore. There's so many different varieties of chicken nuggets that are available, and there's so many different ways to conveniently cook them in a, positive and in a way that supports proper fueling. I'm not mad at a chicken nugget. I think suggestions, if I was working with him, would be to increase nutrient variety throughout the day. That's something that we always talk about with our athletes, is how can we, add in different nutrients, because we have 6 essential nutrients. So how can we get in a variety of those through a variety of different foods? That being said, though, I know some athletes are super superstitious. You might not want to mess with race day fueling. So if that's what he's eating and that's what he feels the best with and that's what he feels the most confident with, I'm not going to mess with his chicken nuggets. Maybe try to incorporate a variety of other nutrients on other days and see if he can maybe even add in some other foods with the chicken nuggets on his race day. But especially if somebody's been doing something for a really long time, I'm not going to necessarily mess with it.
Going off of that too, I would also maybe guess that being in a foreign country, if he wasn't familiar with local cuisine or something like that, and that was something that he was familiar with, I know we've talked a lot about before, keeping things as familiar as possible. So if chicken nuggets were what he was familiar with, but maybe the other options he wasn't as familiar with, I could see that maybe even playing into his decision too, to utilize chicken nuggets, even if it was for all 3 meals that he consumed during the day.
Yes. And that kind of goes back to it's hard to sometimes comment on certain people's fueling choices, because we don't know exactly what's going on, right? Options in China and Japan versus South America versus Europe versus, North America, those fueling options that are going to be available are going to be very different. And especially when you look at, the US dietitians prepping for Paris, they've been sending over pallets and pallets and pallets of food. And if your country doesn't necessarily have those resources, right, you might be responsible for bringing your own food or shipping your own food. And what you're eating while you're competing might look very different than what you're doing on a day-to-day basis at home.
The other thing that he mentioned too, not necessarily in Beijing and between the chicken nuggets, but between his other meals, maybe on practice days or maybe on other races, he utilizes a lot of bananas, mangoes, pineapples, and apples. So very fruit forward with his choices there. What are your thoughts?
Carbs. We love carbs. I think that mango, again, it might be a trend among our track athletes. These are, great options, and they're also foods that might be readily available for him and his country as well.
We're going to switch it up now, and we're going to head over to the pool. We're going to start with Michael Phelps because there is the most information and the most notorious plan for fueling about Michael Phelps because he was so open about it, what he was consuming. We're going to start there before we move on. But he said for breakfast before his races, when he was competing, he had 3 fried egg sandwiches with cheese, tomato, lettuce, and onions, followed by 3 chocolate chip pancakes. Then he had a 5-egg omelet, slices of French toast, a bowl of grits, and 2 cups of coffee.
I'm impressed. This is why I think also it's very interesting because we always talk about it depends on this situation. And you have to also remember that that might have been his only meal of the day. Depending on what time his bid time is, on whatever time his race started, right? Sometimes with swimming and all these other sports, you're not competing until 6 o'clock at night. But if you're, Michael Phelps, you're doing press all day, you're at the pool, you're warming up, you're doing all these things, he might have not had access to other meals throughout the day. So therefore, he was eating a very big meal in this situation. Or he was really, active. He was one of the athletes that was doing the most events. I mean, you consistently look at he's winning the most medals. I think some other people might have broken his record, but he was competing in a ton of events and therefore he needed a ton of energy.
Yeah, especially with swimming, if their report time to the pool for warm up is super early and then they have multiple events throughout the day, he's going to need to fuel up for that because there's not a guarantee that maybe he could fit in or had time to fit in an entire meal in addition to that. So I kind of love it. He talked too about afterwards having pasta or pizza or something like that, later on in the day. They didn't talk so much about what he was doing in between his races. Some of the other athletes now really talk about their in between fueling and stuff like that. And I'm really excited to talk to you about the next person because she really is open about that. And I think it's fantastic. We don't know exactly what was going on in that day, but for somebody who is going to need that much energy to get through all of his races or whatever events he had that day, you're going to need fuel because with swimming, especially you might have multiple events in a day that you have to be ready for. So definitely need fuel.
I also think too that shout out to Michael Phelps because I feel like he was one of the first athletes that positively talked about how much he fueled because as somebody that is active and as an athlete, your energy needs are going to be so much higher than the normal population. And I think that's not been normalized yet. We're oh my gosh, athletes eat so much. And it's maybe the rest of the population is not eating enough.
It was rumored that his intake on a day was around 10,000 calories. And I remember specifically the announcers and the people talking, there was the picture that popped up of his breakfast. And even in 8th grade when this was happening, I remember some of the announcers being that's enough for 5 grown men. And I was well, he swims enough for 5 grown men. So he probably needs that much energy. So just like Reilly said, we don't know his specific needs, but athletes need a lot of energy and that's okay. And for some people, it might be appropriate to have something that is 5 times what we think of as the average person's recommendations, average person in air quotes, what they need in order to support their daily activities.
Yeah. I mean, think about how often we're recommending, some of our, female athletes who, females are generally smaller than males. Some of our female athletes who are endurance athletes, we're recommending 4,000 calories per day. So, Michael Phelps being probably close to 7 feet tall, right? Definitely over 6'5", and being an Olympic athlete who's training all the time, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 calories to maintain his energy needs doesn't seem that far off.
Totally agree with you. We're going to stick in the pool and we're going to talk about Katie Ledecky, another person that I am just cheering for because watching her swim and watching her crush records and things like that has just been so exciting over the past couple of years. The thing that she says is that she likes to have oatmeal with some peanut butter and banana before training and on race days because she wants it to be the same and she likes that consistency. So when she has to be up first thing in the morning before a 5 a.m. practice or an early time at the pool, like that's what she's having. And I love that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, let's go, Katie Ledecky. You have to practice your fueling. We talk about this all the time. You have to practice your fueling on practice day so that you're ready to go on competition day. And that is such a big mistake that we see our athletes make, is they're thinking that only what's happening on competition or race day is what matters. And that's not the case. If you're not used to eating breakfast on your practice days, your gut is not going to be able to accept that fuel on race day. And that is such a big mistake that athletes make. And that's also one of the reasons that Katie Ledecky is also the best. So I'm not saying it's correlated, but it might be.
The next point that she made might also be correlated. We've talked about how big of fans we are of this, but she says that she has been drinking chocolate milk after her races since she was 13 years old.
Have you seen the video of her swimming the length of the pool with a glass of chocolate milk on her head?
Yeah.
I mean, we love chocolate milk. I think that almost every single person that we have on this podcast, they say that their favorite post-workout fuel is chocolate milk because it has, close to that 3-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein that can help optimize recovery and maximize muscle protein synthesis.
The next things that I want to talk about are her in between events on a meet day. So we know she has her oatmeal with banana and peanut butter before the meet, but what is she having in between? She says she always has a sports drink on hand and a granola bar. And she says that typically she'll have the granola bar like 10 minutes before entering the pool without a problem. And that's probably because she's practiced that. Like, I think that really goes against that whole idea that you can't have food within 30 minutes of like getting in a pool or anything like that. So she has those types of things. What are your thoughts on sports drinks, energy bars before hopping in the pool to compete?
Who is Katie Ledecky's dietitian? Because they're amazing. Shout out to you. I love this. I mean, first of all, she's practicing this. I know if she's practicing her oatmeal, she's also practicing like her, pre-swim fueling. Every single person is going to be different, but you can train the gut to accept fuel. Usually about 1 gram of carbohydrate per minute. And I'm sure she has that timed out and figured out with her sports drink. And I'm sure it is a carb-based bar as well, because protein and fat take a little bit longer to digest. And it's probably a little challenging for her to digest that 10 minutes out. Her event too also is going to be different than like the 50 meter, right? The 50 meter is going to be very different than her 1500 race. So she might also have a little bit more time to digest because it is very fast. I'm not taking it away from her at all, but it is more of an aerobic sport. She has a little bit more time to digest those carbohydrates.
Right. She has longer than 30 seconds in the pool, so she's going to need to sustain that over a longer period of time.
Yes.
Okay, the last athlete that we're going to do, I couldn't leave her out, the absolute greatest of all time in a sport that I am not super familiar with, Simone Biles.
You go, Simone Biles.
She says for her breakfast, usually she does oatmeal, some eggs, and maybe a piece of toast. And she'll try to sometimes eat a banana too as she gets closer to competition, like right before the meet.
We love a carb-based breakfast. We love a carb-based breakfast. We love a carb-based fueling top off. I think it's great that she has a mixture of protein and carbohydrates, and I would love to see some color added to that breakfast. Something that we always talk about is, eggs have all of the vitamins in there except for vitamin C. So she could just add some strawberries or maybe some like clementines or some type of citrus to help. Vitamin C is also an antioxidant, so it can kind of help you feel refreshed going into your workout. But I love that she is having a carb-based breakfast and has some protein and is not worried, or I guess maybe she's kind of trained her gut to accept fuel, especially, for a high demanding sport when you're tumbling and, up in the air and all that stuff. So really training your gut, especially for gymnastics, is so important.
The thing she says she does on non-meet days, she focuses a lot more on getting in her fiber and lean protein, since it didn't sound like she had a ton of that during her meet days. That was on days when she wasn't competing. So what are your thoughts on that?
We love a switching up of the performance plate on certain days, because just going back to, right, we have 6 essential nutrients. Some days we're focused on carbs and protein, and some days we're focused on protein and color, and other days colors and carbs. And it really just depends on the athlete training pattern and also like kind of just the individualization. So maybe I even spoke too soon when I gave feedback on her breakfast.
But that I think just goes to show that everyone is different. And as Paris comes up in August, we're going to be hearing a lot about what these athletes eat, what they're consuming before meet, before a race, and things like that. And remember that everyone is going to have different needs, different recommendations from their team that they're working with to help them be the best athlete possible. So whatever they are consuming, it's probably been laid out for them as the things that they have practiced, things that are going to support their goals and hopefully help them bring home gold. So even if you hear somebody say that 10,000 calories is so much and it's, enough for 5 grown men, that might be what that athlete needs. So we're really excited to see all of the great things that happen in Paris and just watch all of the great competition. The last thing I'm going to say is that Simone Biles also loves to order from Uber Eats. And she said she does that a lot for lunch. And I think it's great to just be a reminder too, that like having those convenience things, having things like that are usable from any level of athlete.
Exactly. And there's also like nothing wrong with like enjoying your fueling, and you can fuel your body properly while still enjoying it. You know what I love about every single athlete that you mentioned?
What's that?
They're all eating something before they compete. None of them are doing it like fasted or an empty stomach, or nobody's saying I can't eat before I work out, because they've all practiced their fueling and they know what works for them.
If you have additional questions for Reilly and I, you can always leave them below, or you can find us on Instagram or at the Eat More Carbs podcast. You can also find us individually. You can find me at jenna.fisher.nutrition, and you can find Reilly at reilly.beatty.nutrition. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Eat More Carbs podcast. Please make sure you rate, subscribe, and review. And as always, remember to eat more carbs.